Hello everyone, this is Desocrates, and in this video we're going into the history of the Roman who helped to win the Second Punic War, Scipio Africanus. Many consider him one of Rome's greatest generals. Scipio was born into the Cornelii Scipio family and was actually born through a C-section. His father was a consul named Publius Cornelius Scipio, and his wife was called Pomponia. It is believed that he was born in either 236 BC or 235 BC. His birth year was worked out from statements made by ancient historians. While still young, Scipio joined the Roman struggle against Carthage in the first year of the Second Punic War, while his father was consul. He saved his father's life during the Battle of Ticinus by charging the encircling force alone with reckless daring. He survived the disaster at the Battle of Cannae, where his would-be father-in-law, the consul Lucius Aemilius Paulus, was killed. After the battle, with the other consuls surviving elsewhere, Scipio and another military tribune took charge of the 10,360 survivors. After hearing that Lucius Caecilius Metellus and other young Roman nobles were planning to go overseas to serve some king, Scipio stormed into the meeting at sword point and forced them all to swear that they would not abandon Rome. In 213 BC, Scipio, alongside his cousin, offered himself as a candidate for Aedilis Curulus, which was a Roman office. The tribunate of the plebs objected to Scipio being a candidate, saying that because he had not yet reached legal age, he could not be allowed to stand for that office. Scipio, already being known for his bravery and loyalty to Rome, was elected, and the tribunes of the plebs abandoned their opposition. His cousin also won the election. In 211 BC, while campaigning in Spain, both Scipio's father and uncle were killed in a battle against Hannibal's brother, Hannibal Barca. At the election of a new proconsul for the command of a new army which the Romans planned to send to Hispania, modern-day Spain, Scipio was the only man brave enough to ask for the position. All other candidates considered it a death sentence. Despite Scipio only being 25 years old, his noble and enthusiastic language had made such a great impression that he was elected without opposition. Hannibal's brothers Hasdrubal and Mago were the generals in charge of the Carthaginian forces in Hispania. Rome was aided by the fact that the brothers had the inability to work together. Scipio landed at the mouth of the Ebro River and was able to surprise and capture New Carthage, which was the headquarters of the Carthaginian power in Hispania. Because of this, he obtained rich war spoils, supplies, an excellent harbour and a base of operations for future attacks into Hispania. Scipio acted kindly towards all of his prisoners in Hispania, which helped to portray the Romans as liberators as opposed to conquerors. Livy tells the story of Scipio's troops capturing a beautiful woman, whom they offered to him as a prize of war. Scipio was astonished by her beauty, but he discovered that the woman was engaged with a local chieftain already. Instead of keeping her, he returned the woman to her fiancé, along with the money that had been offered by her parents to ransom her. This act of kindness encouraged the local chieftains to both supply and reinforce Scipio's small army. The woman's fiancé, who soon married her, responded by bringing over his tribe to support the Roman armies. In 209 BC, Scipio fought his first pitched battle in Hispania, driving back the Carthaginians. He feared that the armies of the two brothers would enter the field and surround his small army. Because of this, Scipio's objective was to quickly eliminate one of the armies to give him the luxury of taking one army out at a time. Scipio charged his infantry through the centre of the Carthaginian position. Roman losses are uncertain, but may have been considerable in light of an effort to scale an elevation by Carthaginian light infantry. Scipio had a hidden reserve of cavalry moving behind enemy lines. He led these cavalry himself to create a pincer attack on the Carthaginian forces. This tactic broke the Carthaginian army and forced them to retreat. Despite this victory, Scipio was unable to hinder their later march to Italy. One theory for Scipio failing to pursue the Carthaginians is that Scipio merely wanted the glory of securing Hispania, but the most likely explanation would be that Scipio was unwilling to risk being between Hasdrubal's army on one side and the two other Carthaginian armies on the other side. Just days after Hasdrubal's defeat, both his brothers' armies were able to converge in front of the Roman positions, bringing into question what would have happened if Scipio had followed Hasdrubal. After winning over a number of Hispanian chiefs, Scipio managed to achieve a decisive victory in 206 BC over the Carthaginian army, which resulted in the Carthaginian commanders leaving Hispania. After his success in conquering Hispania, he now had the idea of striking a blow at Carthage in Africa. Scipio paid a short visit to two Numidian princes. Numidia at the time was of vital importance to Carthage, supplying them mercenaries and allied forces. In addition to supplying the Numidian cavalry, Numidia also acted as a buffer for vulnerable Carthage. Scipio at first managed to receive support from both Numidian princes, but one later changed his mind, marrying the daughter of Hasdrubal and fighting alongside his Carthaginian in-laws against his Numidian brother and Scipio in Africa. In 206 BC, Scipio founded the settlement of Italica in southern Spain. It is believed that it later became the birthplace of 3 Roman emperors. On his return to Hispania, Scipio had to deal with a mutiny which had broken out among his troops. After this, having secured the Roman occupation of Hispania, he gave up his command and returned to Rome. In 205 BC, Scipio was elected consulship at the age of 31, again unopposed. Scipio intended to go back to Africa, but due to the envy of others in the Senate, he was not given any additional troops beyond the garrison in Sicily. Despite all this, Scipio gathered resources from supporters in Rome and some Italian communities. This allowed him to muster a volunteer force of 30 warships and 7,000 men. The Romans had for a time used service in Sicily as a form of punishment, with the result that the garrison in Sicily contained survivors from many of the greatest Roman military losses in the war, such as the Battle of Cannae. Having served with these men at Cannae, Scipio was well aware that their disgrace was through no fault of their own. From these men, Scipio was able to muster a highly motivated and experienced force for his African invasion. Scipio turned Sicily into a camp for training his army. Scipio realised that the Carthaginian forces, especially the superior Numidian cavalry, would prove decisive against the largely infantry forces of the Roman legions. One story tells of how Scipio forced into service several hundred Sicilian nobles to create a cavalry force. The Sicilians, who were only part of Rome since the First Punic War, were quite opposed to this and protested. Scipio agreed with them and let them be free, providing they paid for a horse, equipment and a replacement rider for the Roman army. By doing this, Scipio created a trained force of cavalry for his African campaign. The Roman Senate sent someone to go inspect Sicily and found Scipio at the head of a well-equipped and trained fleet and army. Scipio pressed the Senate for permission to cross into Africa. Some of the Senate, championed by someone named Quintus Fabius Maximus Verrucosus Contator, also known as the Delayer, opposed the mission. Fabius objected as he still feared Hannibal's power and viewed any mission into Africa as dangerous and wasteful to the war effort. All Scipio could obtain was permission to cross over from Sicily to Africa if it appeared to be in the interests of Rome, but not financial or military support. With the permission of the Senate, Scipio sailed in 204 BC and landed near Utica in Africa. Meanwhile, Carthage had secured the friendship of the Numidians, whose friendship forced Scipio to abandon the siege of Utica and dig in on the shore between there and Carthage. In 203 BC, he managed to destroy the combined armies of Carthage and Numidia by approaching by stealth and setting fire to their camp. This caused the combined army to panic and flee. They were then mostly killed by Scipio's army. Though it was not necessarily a battle, the estimated death toll in this one attack exceeded 40,000 Carthaginian and Numidian dead, and more captured. With this victory, Scipio quickly dispatched some of his men to pursue the Numidian prince. They ultimately managed to dethrone him and ensured Massiniss's coronation as king of the Numidians. Carthage had long relied on the Numidian horsemen, which would now instead fight for Rome against Carthage. Carthage, now deserted by its allies and surrounded by the veteran and undefeated Roman army, began opening diplomatic channels for negotiation. At the same time, Hannibal and his army were recalled to Carthage, and despite the moderate terms offered to Carthage by Scipio, they suddenly suspended negotiations and again prepared for war. Hannibal did have some trained soldiers who had fought in Italy, as well as 80 war elephants. Hannibal had a strength of around 36,000 infantry and 4,000 cavalry, compared to Scipio's 29,000 infantry and 6,100 cavalry. The two generals met on a plain between Carthage and Utica on October 19, 202 BC, at the final Battle of Sema. Despite mutual admiration, negotiation failed largely due to the Roman distrust of the Carthaginians as a result of them breaking the truce which had ended the First Punic War. Hannibal's tactic for this battle was quite simple, a massive forward attack with the war elephants, which would create gaps in the Roman lines, which could then be exploited by the infantry. The elephants found well-laid traps around the Roman position and were greeted by Roman trumpeters, which drove the elephants back out of confusion and fear. On top of this, the elephants were also harassed by Roman javelin troops. Many of them became so distraught that they charged back into their own lines. The Roman infantry were nervous by the elephants, but the Numidian cavalry now serving Rome began to drive back the opposing cavalry. Now that the cavalry on both sides are engaged, this leaves the Carthaginian and Roman infantry free to engage one another. The Roman infantry had managed to drive off the two front lines of the Carthaginian army, and in this short moment took an opportunity to drink water. The Roman army was then drawn up in one long line as opposed to the usual three lines. This was in order to match the length of Hannibal's line. The final struggle between them was hard and was won only when the Roman allied cavalry rallied and charged into the back of Hannibal's army, winning the battle. Many Roman aristocrats, especially Cato, expected Scipio to burn Carthage to the ground after his victory. However, instead Scipio dictated very fair terms compared to the Roman Senate. Scipio demanded the surrender of the fleet and for a lasting tribute to be paid to Rome. He also allowed Hannibal to become the civic leader of Carthage. Scipio was welcomed back to Rome in triumph and was given the title of Africanus. He refused the many further honours which the people of Rome tried granting him, such as Consul for life and Dictator. Scipio retired to his country seat at Liternum on the coast of Campania. He lived there for the rest of his life, believing to have died at the age of 53. He is said to have demanded that his body be buried away from his ungrateful city. It's also said that he ordered an inscription on his tomb, translating to "Ungrateful fatherland, you will not even have my bones." Thanks for watching everyone. If you enjoyed, remember to subscribe as more videos will be coming out soon.